Hello, I am Helen Walters. I am the Ideas Editor at TED, and I am here to welcome a panel about the creative economy, to reflect the idea that no longer is support for entertainment and distribution of entertainment coming from traditional media outlets, but instead is coming from everyone, from all of us. I have an astonishing panel of creative professionals who have proved that using creative platforms such as Kickstarter, which in fact one of our panelists co-founded, can be lucrative, can be successful, and can be deeply interesting. So Amanda Palmer, you came to TED last year and you knocked our socks off with your talk, which we posted as The Art of Asking right after the conference and got 1 million views within about a week. I was going to say 10 minutes, but it was about a week. I wonder if, I think one of the things that really captured the imagination of the audience was your thought, don't make people pay for music, let them. I wonder if you could kind of fill us in on what's happened in the last year and how your thinking about crowdfunding has evolved.
Well, since TED last year, I have completed the tour of that album that I Kickstarted, which I was actually, the timing of my TED Talk last year was a little bizarre because I had put out the Kickstarter record. I had gone through the whole backlash of doing a Kickstarter and then going on the tour, and now I'm out the other end of it entirely, having finished the tour and kind of looking down the barrel of how do I make music next? And a lot of my travels have taken me through lots of conversations with other artists and musicians and people like Yancey who actually are on the back end trying to figure out what's working and what's not working in crowdfunding. I think we're now moving into an era where, like, okay, we get crowdfunding, we get that conceptually it works, and now we're going in and we're finessing which tools will work in what situations and for what artists at what time.
Yeah, well, I'd love to talk a little bit more about, as you say, later about what is working and what's not working. I did want to bring in some of the guys on Skype. Tim, I'd like to start with you. You raised an extraordinary amount of money for your game Double Fine Adventure via Kickstarter and had a huge amount of fans who were interested in participating. How do you manage those rabid fans? How do you balance their need to feel involved in what you're doing with your need to actually get on and do the work?
Well, it was a full-time job. We started the Kickstarter just sitting there answering all the messages all day long. There were a lot of questions, and we were learning so much from them of what they wanted, how they wanted, DRM-free versions of the game, and they taught us a lot. And luckily, being backers, they were all really supportive. And so, even though they were, a big unruly crowd, they were all kind of like a huge cheerleading squad, which was really helpful.
And Ivan, you also worked on a huge project. You worked on the Veronica Mars movie, and you managed the digital campaign for that. Similar question to you: like, how do you balance, like, trying to manage a community at that type of scale,
with also making a movie?
Yeah, with that minor detail of also having to make a major movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's I think we were the first studio level picture to try and do it, and the role that I was brought on as, we called associate producer because there's really no other name for what I ended up doing. But what I was fundamentally brought on to do was kind of strategize and executive produce the Kickstarter campaign, because we tried to see the movie as the end result of a process. But what we had something that wasn't just a new thing we were asking people to take a chance on. It was something that a lot of people had been trying to get back for a long time and hadn't been able to. And so we wanted it to not just be a movie at the end of 1 year where we came back after taking everyone's money and said, here's the thing you were promised, and that's it, thanks. We wanted it to be a year-long experience of being part of what it was like to get that made and to know everyone who was involved in it. So that was really, the balance for me was easy because I didn't have to produce the movie, I produced everything around it.
And this brings up a really important question, which is that weird balance between making a commercial project and not having total control over your distribution, and making a, totally DIY, I'm just making it in my kitchen and putting it into an envelope and mailing it to you project. What do you feel like you learned from that?
We're still learning it. I've been trying to talk with as many backers as possible for the last 72 hours, so I haven't slept a lot.
In the realm of all Kickstarter projects ever, does this happen?
I mean, you're making something with the community, and you are also distributing it directly to them, and so that's a relationship that you're having to respect. I mean, I think that the Veronica Mars project has been an amazing one. And I think it's been an incredible one for fans. 90,000 people have made a Hollywood movie. Never before did people think this was possible. It's a huge revelation.
I think what I've loved most about the whole way that the Veronica Mars thing has happened is watching an actual shift, not necessarily in the understanding from journalists, because journalists are always the last to figure things out, but down in the comments. Whereas a year ago, people would be going, oh my God, they're making a Hollywood movie and cheating people out of the profits. Now, if you actually get somebody down in the comments going, they've made a movie and they've cheated people out of the comments, you get 24 people saying,
no,
actually, I paid the money to see the movie, and I got the movie that I wanted. The deal is exactly the deal I wanted. You're stupid, go away. And it is that wonderful cultural thing of the you're stupid, go away that is beautiful. It means that people are actually figuring out what this thing is for and how it works.
I'm super glad you mentioned that, actually. Two things that were interesting. One is that we see these arguments all the time, and our fans take it upon themselves to go onto other forums and argue with journalists and with the press, because the only ones who don't seem sometimes to think that our fans are being taken advantage of are our fans, who, I think to Kickstarter's credit, feel that they got exactly what they wanted. They had been asking for something for 7 years. There wasn't a good economic proposition to make it worthwhile or workable under the old system. And they got exactly what they wanted. I mean, we posted, Rob, the director and creator of Veronica Mars, sent an update on Friday night when the movie came out worldwide in theaters and was distributed across all of the major platforms, and asked people for their feedback on the movie. And we've been flooded all weekend. There have been 1,500, 1,600 messages from people who tell us these stories about reconnecting with their families and how they never thought this day would happen, and how it's the best money they've ever spent, and how they want to spend 10 times more if we do it again, and how they hope that even if the studio will pay for it, they'd rather the studio didn't, because they really don't want to be cut out of the process of getting to be part of it next time. It's incredible to watch. The flip side of that, which I'd be really curious, especially for Tim, for Amanda, for those of you who have done these projects where you ask your biggest supporters and fans for help up front. I don't know if any of you watched Veronica Mars when it was on, or if you've seen the movie yet. But we run into another problem that I think is unique to Kickstarter, and Yancy, I'm curious if you've seen this too, which is that for us, there was a love triangle in the original television show that we were bringing back, and fans had very strong feelings about how they wanted that love triangle to play out. And the paparazzi were paying so much attention during our production that they took photos on set about 3 or 4 days into shooting that implied which way that love triangle might go, and it wasn't the way that fans want, because you don't tell the exact story fans think they want, or you wouldn't have a story. But we got hundreds of emails that day from people who said, that is not what I gave my money to. If they get back together in the movie, I want my money back, and this was not what I meant to fund.
Wow,
and so there's been this really interesting learning curve for us of whose story is it, and were they giving the money just to let Rob tell the story he wanted to tell, or did they have a right to be part of the creative process and not just the production process? So it's been, that's been one of the most fascinating things to me.
And that's a really interesting point too. And Max, actually, I have this question for you. It seems like these crowdfunding projects, they're based on projects, right? They're not about sustaining the creative lifestyle. And so, Max, I wonder if you can talk about that in terms of Cards Against Humanity. That was the perfect creative project. But has this affected the way that you think about creativity and about your own creative journey? And is this influencing the way that you're actually thinking about using crowdfunding?
One of the interesting things about Cards Against Humanity is it didn't exist before our Kickstarter. It wasn't like a project that we needed additional funding to keep working on. It was just this thing that we wanted to try, and it was a weird game, and it was a risk, and we thought we would bring it to people and see if they wanted to play it. So we've always had a very different relationship, I think, with our backers than some of these other projects, because for us it's always been the proof of concept of would people find this funny, and would they want to play it.
Right.
But that being said, we've also, at various points, we've tried to open up the writing. We take card suggestions and joke suggestions on our website, and they're terrible. They're universally just awful and not funny. So we've also tried to draw a very hard line of making it clear that you are consuming a creative product that we're producing, and that it's more like a patronage model of we're going to write this game, and then you can buy it, and then we'll include blank cards if you want to modify it, but we're not really interested in creative notes from our backers.
Yeah.
So Frank, you are a classically trained cellist, and you are just dabbling your toes into this world of crowdfunding and community building. And actually, I wanted to give you the floor. I wanted to see if you have any questions for Tim or for Ivan or for Amanda or for Neil or for Yancey or for Max or for anybody, even me. Ask me a question. I know nothing, but I will try and answer it. But do you have questions that you want to ask these guys?
Yeah, sure. I've got a few. I guess in regards to Kickstarter, how can one gauge what constitutes a, I guess, a large enough fan base to yield results when embarking on a creative project?
Amanda, do you want to take that?
Yeah, that's such an important question that gets asked so often, and it always astounds me because I think because people don't really think about crowdfunding in the right way, it's like someone asking, so how good does your product have to be to start a company? Or how many people have to be interested in this product in order for you to make it? Which is like kind of a real question, but it's also kind of not a real question, because it really depends what you want to do with your life. So if you're happy to have, 50 people supporting you at X level, it's basically you have to define what you consider successful, and then I can answer that for you, or anyone could.
Well, it's the way to know. I mean, if you think about Veronica Mars, for 7 years, Hollywood said, no, this is not worth making, and then finally Rob was able to get the permission to put it to the public, and in 10 hours, the public answered and said, yes, of course. For 7 years, it's an unanswerable question. In 10 hours, people knew. So the average project has 85 backers and raises around $5 or $6 grand. So, how many people you want to be a part of it really scales according to your needs and like what you've done in the past and how wide you want to go with something. Yeah. But, what I love is that, 85 people is enough to make something creative and to create something that then exists in the world and can be experienced by those 85 people and also a wider circle. So, what it precisely does is it fits exactly your needs. You determine everything. It is completely within your control.
Well, and it's a dance. I think, like everything else nowadays, everyone wants to make it black and white. And it's like, well, is it the artist in control or is it the backers? And, you go into crowdfunding hoping, kind of knowing, not really knowing. And then it becomes a two-way conversation where the artist is basically determining what kind of level of involvement they want the audience to have, and every artist and creative person does it differently. Yeah. Like, some gamer might decide this is going to be a totally crowd-sourced, crowd-involved, everyone is going to have a voice, and then you might have an artist who is like, I just want to make a classical piece of music. There's no input from the audience whatsoever. But then might actually shift their thinking when someone in their crowd comes up with a creative idea for their artwork or so. So when it's working well, it's a dance. And evolves.
I think one of the things that you've also hit on is you cannot have nobody. You actually, you need your yogurt starter. You need to know that you have people to go out to, whether it's all of your friends and all of your family and any kind of fan base, just people who like you. They are your yogurt starter. And you want to put up the best possible Kickstarter or whatever crowdfunding platform you're using way of accessing them, because you also want them to tell people. It's the social joy in going, hey, I supported this thing and it's really cool and you should too. And you could be a part of this. And with luck, as I say, they are your yogurt starter and they will go out and tell other people and transform them into yogurt. That is a terrible metaphor.
I just love every time you say yogurt. It's so cute.
And now I'm English, so obviously yogurt means many things to me. Well, it means one thing to me, but what on earth do you mean by yogurt starter?
Okay, if you are making yogurt, yes. you need to begin with, or sourdough bread or whatever. You need to begin with a culture, and that tiny bit of yogurt will transform the rest of the sour milk into the yogurt that you need. And with Kickstarter, you need to begin with enough of a core in some way. Whether you have fans, whether you have friends, whether there are just people who you can communicate with, who will then go out and, having supported you, tell other people, promote it. And you can get you can sometimes shortcut things by finding people with a lot of influence. You know, I have
Funny
2
you
million.
should mention that.
Well, I have 2 million followers on Kickstarter. But what's interesting is with 2 million followers on Kickstarter.
You mean Twitter?
On Twitter, I'm a twit. Sorry.
Very nice, man.
Thank you. With 2 million followers on Twitter, I cannot kickstart. I cannot get a project that nobody wants to supported on Kickstarter. My friends will occasionally come and say, "Will you plug this?" And I'll look at it and go, "Oh, I guess, okay." And I will put up a cheerful, enthusiastic plug, and it will be sitting there at $10 support, and I will go out to 2 million people and say, "Support this," and it will go up to $20 and stick there.
Right, you can't fool them.
You cannot.
Which is good.
You really can't, which is great.
Yes.
And on the other hand, when people put up a great Kickstarter and then it goes sky high because I put out the thing that, and people go, "Well, of course you made $1 million. Neil Gaiman supported you." And you go, "No, it doesn't work like that. You have to have the great Kickstarter."
But I think anyone who's had any success with Kickstarter would know, like, you do need a crowd in order to crowdfund. It doesn't happen by magic at all. You have to have something first. And Veronica Mars, like, all of that work, all of those fans, that whole community, and then Kickstarter is the tool. It's not the thing that made all those people show up.
Two quick points. One, just to the question of how many people do you need, I'll just throw in a fun wonky fact, which is that there may be some merit in not having more people than you need, because I'll tell you that we spent a disproportionate amount of time over the last year figuring out how to print and distribute 85,000 t-shirts around the world. That wasn't a challenge we necessarily had fully anticipated the difficulty of. But the other thing I'll say to what both Amanda and Neil are saying is, you know, I think the number can be a little bit of a red herring, because like Yancey said, you can have, you know, 85 people, or you can have 91,585, which is what we had. But I think the biggest mistake people make on Kickstarter, because I've now, since Veronica Mars, I've consulted on a bunch of others, and I talked to Spike Lee when he was starting his, and I talked to Zach Braff's team when they were starting theirs, and then a lot of much smaller independent ones that weren't trying to build on an existing name. And I think, you know, the biggest mistake a lot of people make going into crowdfunding or Kickstarter is thinking that their project is fundamentally about them. People show up and say, "Here's what I want to do, here's why you should help me do what I want." And I think the projects that succeed are the ones that can effectively articulate, "Here's why I want to do something that I think you want." I mean, I don't think it's completely a selfless thing to give to crowdfunding. People aren't doing it because they want to do Rob or Amanda or Neil a favor. They're doing it because they want back what could get made.
So, Tim, I have a question for you, which is that what should creators do if they are, in fact, deeply antisocial? Like, do you have to be able to engage at this level, and do you have to be able to dive into this type of field? Or, like, what do you do if actually you're a deep introvert, you hate social media, hate the idea of all of this? Like, are you just screwed?
Strangely enough, it comes up in the games industry a lot. There are a lot of slightly shy people in the games industry. And if you're not good at facing your backers, it's good to hire someone who can, if you have the ability to hire someone. But I think part of the reason we had some success is that we were facing them and talking to them every day. And I do think it's really important to be present for them and answer all their questions and be really responsive, because sometimes they would be a huge flare-up and everyone would be mad about something, and we would just post one message saying, "Okay, we heard you," and then it would die away. But if we let that go for maybe a whole day or 24 hours or 2 days, it would become a huge problem for us. So you really do have to be responsive, especially if you have a lot of backers. I don't know if you're screwed if you're shy, though. That sounds pretty harsh.
It does a bit. Max, do you have any thoughts on that?
You know, we've had such a different experience on Kickstarter, and I've had such a different experience doing my projects. You know, I've never tried to make something as ambitious as like a Broken Age or a Veronica Mars project, so I don't know that you know, I don't know that a lot of what I've learned is kind of related to these problems. You know, one thing I've been thinking about is I often give people Kickstarter advice, but usually for smaller projects, for like, you know, a small indie game or something like that. And I often give them the advice to just focus, you know, very specifically on like the one creative thing they want to do, and explain that really clearly, and not try to turn it into, you know, a Veronica Mars movie. You know, it doesn't need to be $1 million project. And to just keep the scope very small and manageable, because I think especially for smaller, more independent creators, they can really get themselves into trouble if they start trying to do like T-shirts and merchandise, and sometimes that can distract logistically, like can take their time away from the creative thing that they want to make, but it can also distract the from the story of the project. It can become this whole sideshow that's not about making the creative thing that you want to make.
I think that brings me back to the point that a lot of these platforms are really about the project, and the project is about the prize, and it's about the stuff that you're kind of making and distributing to the fans and the people who are supporting the project. Where are the platforms that are kind of supporting general creative lifestyles and just kind of giving you the ability to do whatever the hell you want without having to give a T-shirt or a mug or something like that?
I think that one of the glories of Kickstarter, if you've been supporting it for a while, is the point where you look up in the world and you actually go, I don't need another T-shirt, and I don't want another mug, but I think you guys are great. And more and more these days, I will support things without asking for any of the fancy stuff.
So you have the opt-out button.
Well, again, I mean, creators have complete creative freedom over what they want to do. And so what a lot of projects are doing is that they're mimicking each other and just saying, what worked for this person, I'll try to apply it to my thing. But same as, Max is exactly right. Again, the average project has 85 backers, about $5,000. The focus on these $1 million projects really creates a very distorted picture of what Kickstarter actually is. And most projects, you're producing like a thing that you're going to share with other people when it's done, and you are financing the ability for you to be able to make that thing. It's actually a very simple exchange. And people add these other elements that can become complicated, I think, to try to reach a broader scale, but ultimately, I think, are probably a little self-defeating.
But I think what's great about the $1 million projects and the big ones is that you always wind up with people who had no idea that Kickstarter existed,
for sure.
getting dragged in and then having supported a $1 million project, suddenly finding, some cool graffiti project or some weird little, going around and reciting Shakespeare project that they now want to support as well.
Not to knock the $1 million projects, but I definitely agree with Yancey that I see this like this crazy like cargo cult around, sometimes that small project creators will make, where they're like, well, I just want to do this one, very focused thing, and maybe I need $1,000 or $2,000. But I'm going to look at a project that I love. I'm going to look at something like Double Fine Adventure or the Veronica Mars movie, and I'm just going to copy that structure. Well, it worked for them to get $1 million, so that just automatically must be the best structure for me. And I think that's really it's not the most careful thinking through of like what Kickstarter is. Like Kickstarter is this amazing creative tool, and it should fit the kind of project that you want to make, and it should be part of the artistic expression of the thing that you're trying to do.
Yeah, and I actually, in that sense, I sometimes feel a little guilty about my Kickstarter because I barely even broke even. I mean, going into the financials of it would make me cry and bore you. But I went into it going, well, I have multiple income streams, and the Kickstarter is going to be this great, glorious pre-order where everyone gets involved. But I was very sloppy about it being highly profitable. I assumed that any profit I didn't make would be good karma because it would be a really, really strong push for crowdfunding in my business and in the world and in general, and everyone would be like, great, look at this thing. But if any musician were to just go out and copy my Kickstarter, they'd be screwed.
Right.
They would lose so much money. And
whatever you do, do not give free shipping around the world on every single thing you are offering on your Kickstarter. Do not do this.
The system now accounts for international shipping. The one thing I would just say is that I will routinely see people, I will see creators talk about their, like a Kickstarter horror story of like, and in the end I had to make all this stuff to send to people, and it took all the money I raised, which of course is precisely the point. The point is that you're raising the money to make the thing and to distribute to all these people, and you're not in debt, and you're able to make something with complete creative freedom and total control, and that's the point. That is a feature of the system, not a bug. And so there's certainly projects that do build in profit, and if like a creator personally profits from their project, hell yeah, like that's great for them. But so the idea that the funding, all the money that you raise goes right back into the work itself is kind of the idea.
Right, but it needs to be the work itself and not the merchandise associated with the work. Hopefully if you're not wasting your life and your energy.
So Frank, I'd like to throw it to you one more time and just see if you have any final thoughts about this kind of thing. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of opinions about how to approach this type of thing. What excites you the most about these types of platforms?
I mean, I think it's cool that as an independent artist, we have the power to engage with fans, and more so from a creative standpoint. Like, there's no one saying, okay, create this sort of record or create this sort of album. At the same time, I have a question. I don't know exactly where I'm headed as far as potentially setting up a Kickstarter. I don't know if I'm going to maybe go on tour again, or maybe record an acoustic record, singer-songwriting, or maybe I'll do a electric record. Who knows? But are there any negative implications if a campaign doesn't necessarily succeed? Or
I think the problem or the mistake that a lot of creators make and musicians make is they don't do what anyone can do on Kickstarter, which is make your minimum extremely low, so that there's pretty much no chance that you can't succeed. And I think what you have to do is look at the absolute worst case scenario, and that's your goal, even if it's $500. And that way your Kickstarter is guaranteed to succeed. You don't put a reach goal. You put your absolute conservative minimum. And,
right.
you know.
So I hate to say
also,
sorry,
I was just going to say,
second.
my one thing is, in your video, one, ask for what you need, explain it unapologetically, and make it short, because anyone who doesn't finish watching your video isn't going to fund you. So a 1-minute great video is much better than a 15-minute one.
So here's the thing. We could talk about this all day. I would happily listen to all of you all day, but we're completely out of time. So it just remains for me to thank everybody so much for coming, for being on Skype. We really appreciate it. I know that's a really weird thing, but thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I am Helen Walters, and back to Ted.
Yay. Thanks, guys.